What if I told you the secret to YouTube success is actually less editing, not more? As someone who's grown their channel from 0 to nearly 1 million subscribers, I've seen firsthand how effective this approach can be. Some call it authentic editing, others call it minimalist editing, and it's taking YouTube by storm. And with viewers craving more genuine content, adopting this technique now could put you ahead of the curve. And by the end of this video, you'll understand how using authentic editing could potentially boost your views, engagement, and your revenue. So let's dive into why this technique is so powerful. Now, I know you might be thinking, Shane, I've heard about all kinds of editing techniques before. What makes this one so special? Well, this isn't just about making videos look pretty or keeping people's attention. Authentic editing is about creating real connections with your audience, delivering massive value, and yes, potentially making a lot more money from your YouTube channel. But before we dive in, I want to give you a quick heads up. This video is going to be packed with actionable information that you can start using right away to improve your YouTube strategy. So whether you're a coach, consultant, course creator, or any type of online entrepreneur or creator in general, and you're looking to leverage YouTube, then you're going to be in the right place. And by the end of this video, you'll understand why traditional YouTube editing techniques might actually be hurting your channel, how authentic editing can help you build stronger connections with your audience, and the step-by-step process for implementing this technique in your own videos. And most importantly, how this can translate into real business growth. So if you're ready to take your YouTube game to the next level and start seeing some serious results, stick around. This could be the game changer that you've been looking for. All right, so let's start by talking about what I call retention editing. And if you've been on YouTube for any length of time, you've probably seen this style many times. It's characterized by rapid fire cuts and transitions, constant visual stimulation, and fast-paced delivery of information. And one of the masters of this style is Mr. Beast himself. Now let's take a quick look at one of his videos that uses this style.
Recreated every single set from Squid Game in real life, and whichever one of these 456 people survives the longest wins 456 grand.
Now don't get me wrong, Mr. Beast is incredibly successful and this style of editing does have its place. And the algorithm has historically favored this type of content because it tends to keep people watching. And that's the whole point of retention editing, to keep viewers glued to the screen. But here's the thing, just because something keeps people watching doesn't mean it's the best way to grow your business through YouTube. In fact, I found that this style of editing can actually hold you back, especially if you're in the B2B space or selling high ticket offers. And on top of that, lately, Mr. Beast has been switching to a more authentic style that prioritizes storytelling. But let me give you a personal example. A few years ago, when I was first starting out on YouTube, I decided to try my hand at retention editing. I spent hours cutting together a video, adding fancy graphics, the whole 9 yards. And I would spend a ridiculous amount of time editing these videos. And sometimes the videos would do pretty well, and sometimes they would flop. But the biggest thing that I noticed is it didn't translate to any real business growth. People watched the video, maybe they even enjoyed it, but they weren't taking the next step. They weren't joining my email list, they weren't booking calls, they weren't clicking on my links, and they certainly weren't buying my products. And that's when I started to realize the unexpected downsides of retention editing. And there are 3 main issues that I've identified with this type of editing. First of all, there's less value delivered to the audience. You're entertaining them, but you are not educating them. And when you're focused on keeping people's attention with constant stimulation, it's easy to sacrifice depth for entertainment. You might be covering a lot of ground, but are you really delivering the kind of in-depth, actionable information that your audience needs? Now, the next thing I noticed is difficulty in building genuine connections. Retention editing can make you come across as slick and polished, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but it can also make you seem less authentic, less human. And when you're trying to sell high-ticket offers or build long-term business relationships, that human connection is crucial. And when they're only seeing the highly scripted, highly retention-edited version of you, it doesn't come across as authentic, and they don't know, like, or trust you as much. And the third thing I noticed is that you attract the wrong audience. Here's something that took me a while to figure out. The audience that responds best to retention editing tends to be younger with less buying power. So if you're selling low ticket items or you're focusing on AdSense revenue, that might be fine. But if you're selling coaching programs, consulting services, or other high ticket offers, you need to attract a more mature professional audience, aka attract people that can actually afford your products or services. So let me give you another personal example. Remember that highly edited video I mentioned earlier? Well, after it had been out for a while, I decided to do the same audience research. I found that while the video had attracted a lot of viewers, the majority were in their late teens or early 20s. Not exactly my target market for a high-ticket coaching program. And this realization was a turning point for me. I knew I needed to find a different approach, one that would allow me to deliver real value. and build genuine connections and attract the right kind of audience. And that's when I discovered what I now call authentic editing or minimalist editing. So what exactly is authentic editing? Well, at its core, it's an approach to creating YouTube content that prioritizes delivering value first, building connections second, and maintaining viewer retention third. Now, I want to be clear. This doesn't mean completely eliminating editing. We're not talking about uploading raw, unedited footage here, although that does sometimes work. Authentic editing is about using editing techniques strategically to enhance your message and your personality, not to mask them. And the key principles of authentic editing are longer takes. Instead of rapid fire cuts every few seconds, authentic editing allows for longer, more natural segments of speech. Minimal visual distractions. While you might still use some graphics or text overlays, they're used sparingly and purposefully. And an emphasis on personality. The editing is designed to let your authentic self shine through, quirks and all. Now you might be thinking, Shane, this sounds great in theory, but does it actually work? Well, let me show you some examples of YouTubers who are absolutely crushing it with this technique. First up, we have Simon Alexander Ong. And let's take a look at this video that's titled, I'm 40, and if you're in your 20s, watch this.
Today is my 40th birthday, and if I could go back to talk to my younger 20-year-old self and give him some advice, here are 40 things that I would say.
Now, what you'll notice here is that while Simon does use some stock footage, the majority of the video is just him talking directly to the camera. There are very few quick cuts, no fancy transitions, just Simon sharing his story and his advice. And this style allows Simon's personality to really shine through. You feel like you're getting advice from a friend or a mentor, not watching a polished production. And that authenticity is incredibly powerful when it comes to building trust with your audience. Now let's look at the channel called Accepting the Universe. Their most viewed video, Why Do You Postpone Yourself?, takes authentic editing to the extreme.
I know that a big part of the reason why you clicked on this video was because that sentence called out to you in the title.
This video has almost no apparent editing at all. It's just the creator talking directly to the camera, sharing their thoughts and advice. And it's as close as you can get to a one-on-one conversation through a YouTube video. And that's the exact feeling that you get when you watch the video. You feel like you're talking directly to him. Now you might be thinking, Shane, that's great for philosophical content, but what about more practical business-focused channels? Well, let's look at our third example, Nero Knowledge.
98% views. Reality is a game.
Nero's videos do include some editing, but the format is consistently simple. Just him talking to the audience with a whiteboard. And this allows his personality and expertise to take center stage without any distractions. And one thing I love about Nero's videos is that he's not afraid to include what some might consider to be dead air. There's even a point in one of his videos where he's just erasing the whiteboard for a couple of seconds. But this actually adds to the authenticity of his video. It feels like a real unscripted teaching session. Now, when I first started using authentic editing techniques, I was honestly a bit nervous. I was used to hiding behind fancy edits and transitions, but when I uploaded my first authentically edited video, something amazing happened. Not only did the video perform well in terms of views, but the engagement was off the charts. And most importantly, I saw a significant uptick in people reaching out about my coaching services and actually buying my products. And this experience really drove home for me the absolute power of authentic editing. But why exactly is this technique so effective? Well, let's break down the benefits. First of all, stronger audience connections. When you use authentic editing, you're allowing your true personality to shine through. And this helps viewers feel like they're getting to know the real you, which is crucial for building trust. And trust, as we all know, is essential when you're asking someone to invest in a high-ticket product or service. And I remember when I first started using this technique, I got a comment from a viewer saying, Shane, I feel like I've known you for years after watching this video. And that's the kind of connection we're aiming for. Second is the increased potential for product sales or course enrollments. Here's a hard truth. People don't want to buy from faceless corporations. They want to buy from people they know, like, and trust. And by using authentic editing, you're positioning yourself as a real person, not just another polished guru. And in my own business, I've seen a direct correlation between implementing authentic editing and an increase in sales calls booked. When I first started this channel, for instance, all I had was a Calendly link and I was uploading videos where I recorded the video videos with Loom. No fancy editing, no fancy camera equipment, and I used my iPhone earbuds. And those videos performed much better per 1,000 views than the highly edited and highly polished videos on my main channel. Why? Because people felt like they already knew me before they even got on the phone. And that made the sales process so much smoother. Now, the third thing is building a loyal community. Authentic editing doesn't just help with individual sales, it helps build a community around your brand. When viewers feel like they're getting the real you, they're more likely to become long-term followers and advocates for your brand. And next, it helps you with sharing your genuine voice and personality. Now, this might sound like a little bit of fluff, but hear me out. When you're not constantly worried about maintaining a perfect, polished image, you're free to share your real thoughts and opinions. And this authenticity can set you apart in a sea of cookie-cutter content. I'll give you a personal example. I used to be terrified of showing any vulnerability on camera, but when I started using authentic editing techniques, I felt more comfortable sharing some of my own struggles and failures. And a lot of the time, those ended up being some of my most popular and effective videos. Now, I know what some of you might be thinking. Shane, this all sounds great, but how do I actually implement this in my own videos? Well, I'm glad you asked, because that's what we're going to get into right now. Step 1, plan your content and maintain good production value. Just because we're aiming for authenticity doesn't mean we're throwing planning out the window. In fact, good planning is crucial for authentic editing. Start by outlining your main points. Know what you want to cover and in what order. And this will help you speak confidently and naturally on camera. Now, I'm not saying you have to write everything out word for word. Most of the time, I actually don't do that on either of my channels, but I always have at least an outline or some kind of visual prop that I can look at that will remind me of the points that I want to hit and what order those points are in. Now, the next thing is don't completely neglect your production value. There's a few things that you have to nail. For instance, your face needs to be well lit. You do need to have clear audio, and you don't want your background to be too distracting, because what we're going for here is authentic, not amateur. Step 2, speak to the camera as if you're talking to a friend. This is where the magic happens. When you're recording, imagine you're explaining your topic to a friend over coffee. Use natural language. Don't be afraid of brief pauses, ums, and ahs. Try not to overdo it, of course, but let your personality shine through. And I'll share a personal trick. I often put a picture of someone from my target audience behind my camera. For instance, I literally would put a picture of the younger version of myself behind the camera. Now, I don't do this anymore, but this is when I was first trying to implement this style. And it basically helps me visualize who I'm talking to, and it keeps my delivery natural and conversational. Step 3, let your editing amplify your personality, not mask it. Now, when it comes time to edit, resist the urge to cut out every single imperfection. A few stumbled words or a moment of thought can actually add to the authenticity of your video. Use cuts and transitions sparingly, and when you do use them, make sure they serve a purpose. Maybe you're emphasizing a key point and you cut in on someone's face, for instance, or if you're moving to a new topic, you might put a black screen that has, some text on it just to talk about the topic that you're moving to. Now, don't get me wrong, graphics and text overlays can still be useful, but use them to support your content, not to distract from it. For example, you might use a simple text overlay to highlight a key statistic or concept. Step 4, balance authenticity with retention techniques depending on your audience and niche. Now, I'm not saying we should completely abandon all retention techniques. The key is to find a balance, and it's going to be different for every audience and niche out there. You can still use some techniques to keep your audience engaged, but do it in a way that feels natural and doesn't overshadow your content. For example, you might use a pattern interrupt every few minutes, maybe a relevant B-roll clip or a change in camera angle. Just make sure that these actually serve the content, not distract from it. Now, word of caution, authentic editing doesn't mean you should just wing it on camera. In fact, being completely unprepared can actually make you come across as less authentic because you'll be struggling to articulate your points. One thing that I'll do sometimes is basically present my video to my girlfriend before I present it on camera. And this can really help to kind of gather your thoughts and think of examples that you want to say off the top of your head. Now, I learned this the hard way early on. I thought I could just turn on the camera and start talking and it would come across as super authentic. And instead, I ended up with a rambling, unfocused 25-minute ADHD yap session. And I didn't really deliver any real value to my audience. Now, the key here is to be prepared enough that you can speak confidently and naturally, but not so scripted that you lose your spontaneity and personality. Now, I know that finding the right balance can be tricky, so let's talk about how to find your sweet spot on the spectrum from highly edited to completely raw. When it comes to authentic editing, there's no one-size-fits-all approach. It's all about finding the right balance for your content, your style, and your audience. So let's visualize this as a spectrum. On one end, we have highly edited, fast-paced content like Mr. Beast used to do, or other creators that use a lot of retention editing techniques. And then on the other hand, we have completely raw, unedited content. And authentic editing typically falls somewhere in the middle, but where exactly you land on this spectrum will depend on a few factors. For one, your niche. Some topics lend themselves to a more polished style, while others benefit from a rawer approach. For example, if you're in the finance niche, you might need a bit more polish to establish credibility. If you're in more of a personal development focused niche, a rawer style might work better. Also, younger audiences might expect more dynamic editing, while older, more professional audiences might appreciate a more straightforward approach. And authentic editing is all about letting your personality shine through, so your sweet spot should feel natural and comfortable for you. One really good way of seeing if you're doing videos the right way is if you feel incredibly exhausted after recording a video, it's probably not authentic, because you're probably putting on a show and you're basically just exhausting yourself emotionally. So if you have that experience after recording, that's a sign that you should probably change up your recording and your editing style. Now, another thing is your content type. Informational content might require more supporting graphics or text overlays, while story-based content might need fewer visual aids. And to find your sweet spot, I recommend experimenting. Check out some channels that you like and steal a few things from a bunch of different channels. Never steal a bunch of things from one channel, just steal a few from a bunch of different channels. And then try creating a few videos with different levels of editing and with different channel styles, and see how you like it, but also see how your audience responds. And pay attention to metrics like watch time and engagement, but also to qualitative feedback in your comments. For example, when I was finding my sweet spot, I would experiment with a lot of different styles. And what I found was the middle version, the one that balanced authenticity with some strategic editing, performed the best. And it wasn't just in the form of views, but more importantly, in terms of engagement and conversions to actually making money. And remember, finding your sweet spot is an iterative process. You have to tweak it and mess around and just try different things. And then eventually you'll find that sweet spot between what your audience wants and what you actually enjoy as well. And don't be afraid to adjust your approach as you learn more about what works for you and your audience. Now, as somebody who's achieved incredible success on YouTube myself, plus as somebody who has helped a bunch of other people do the same thing, I've helped about 17 people get to 7 figures a year and 5 people get to 8 figures a year on YouTube with their personal brands. If you're somebody who wants to really take your personal brand seriously and turn your YouTube channel into a real business, go ahead and book a call with me down in the description and the pinned comment below, and we can talk about exactly how you can do that. And also, if you haven't done it already, go ahead and check out my video where I talk about the best monetization strategies on YouTube by clicking right here.